All right, well, I promised I would do a bread making lesson, and this dough I'm going to use is a 12-hour rise. And so that means it's going to ferment and grow for about 12 hours. And our focus here is really making a soft, elastic dough that's going to rise quite nicely. And so what do you need to make artisan bread? So we are going to be working from the textbook of Flour, Water, Salt, Yeast. And this book is by Ken Forkish. You can find it on Amazon. It was a Christmas gift for me last year, so thank you, Mum. And basic materials that you'll need is just some good flour, Robin Hood, no-name flour, Costco brand, whatever. Just make sure it was grown in Canada. It was grown by my brother, that's even better. So, and you need a really nice big mixing bowl. I prefer plastic. This is not Pampered Chef. It doesn't match the apron, but I find the plastic bowls clean easier. And kitchen scale, pretty essential because most professional bakers weigh their ingredients. Salt and quick rise yeast. And we're going to do our proofing of our bread later in wicker baskets. You can also use a decent sized serving bowl lined with parchment if you want. We've got some warm water and we have a thermometer. So first thing that we're going to do is we are going to do what they call an autolyse. And so autolyse is really just it's mixing your flour and your water together to let the ingredients meld, and it starts to work on the enzymes. And so we're going to weigh our ingredients. And so put the bowl on the scale, zero the scale, and I'm measuring in grams. So we're going to measure out 1,000 grams of flour. Now, if you don't have a kitchen scale, this is approximately 7 3/4 cups. All right, but a kitchen scale is going to be more accurate because if your flour is packed, right, it's not fluffy, it's going to weigh up more. All right, and so just get to our weight there. All right, I have 3 grams too much. There we go, perfect. So 1,000 grams of flour. And our water, we want our water to be between 90 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm using my thermometer, and yeah, that's sitting at 91. So the warmer your mixture is, the warmer your faster your yeast is going to grow. So, and then we are going to put in 780 grams into this. So I'm actually just going to zero my scale again. Again, 780 grams. All right, there we go. So now we're just going to mix the flour and water together. I'm going to grab myself a really big mixing spoon. You can actually mix by hand if you want. I'm not that good, so we're just going to mix this all together. And so the idea being is that a lot of people think they've got to knead their bread a lot. And if you want to start out with an even easier recipe, you can go to search New York Times, Jim Leahy, Leahy, some sort of Irish spelling, and there's a no-knead bread recipe there, and you actually don't need the bread at all. So in this case, I'm just trying to combine all the flour and water together, and then we're going to let this sit for 20 to 30 minutes. So what's happening is before we add the salt and the yeast, the flour and water are just starting to chill together, and the amylase in the flour is already starting to break down. and create that nice elastic dough that we're looking for. So I like to try to clean off the sides of my bowl and get everything combined. So sometimes you have to be a little bit patient. Now, some of you might have noticed that I'm making more than I'm giving you quantities for, because I'm making a batch and a half because I want to have some extra pizza dough. So this dough makes really great artisan bread, as well as making really awesome pizza dough. And we'll talk about some of the differences as we go along. So what we're going to do is just laying out a roadmap for you. Timing is important. So we are going to let this dough autolyse for 30 minutes. Then we're going to let it, we're going to mix in the yeast and stuff, and we're going to let it do a bulk fermentation for 12 to 14 hours. And then we're going to shape it into loaves. So if you can imagine that then, so 13 hours from now, we're going to shape this into loaves, and then we're going to let it proof for another hour, and then we're going to bake it. So you can plan on baking 14 hours from when you started mixing, and you can pull it out of the oven roughly 15 hours after. So this is kind of a plan ahead. So like, you don't plan to be at work when you've got to proof your dough. So anyway, so we've had to kind of adjust our family schedule now and again. So anyway, so as I'm talking, this is all well mixed, and we are going to come back in 30 minutes. All right, so we're back. It's been 30 minutes, and our dough has been going through the autolyse, so just mixing the flour and the water. Now, I forgot to talk about cookware. So when we cook artisan bread, we want to put it into a superheated oven, and the cookware already nice and hot, because we put the dough in, put the lid on, and the heat just makes all those little air bubbles expand, and that's why we get the nice bread with great crumb and great structure in it. So the Pampered Chef cast iron enamel Dutch oven is a great choice for that. You can also use a rock crocks, but the lids are only rated to 400, and we're going to cook at 475. So you could put a piece of foil over it, I suppose. I haven't tried that myself. If you've got other brands of Dutch ovens like La Creuset or L'Agostino or whatever, Dutch ovens will work as well. So just move that out of the side for a minute. And so the autolyse is not going to look like much. Now, we're working with a high hydration dough, so it's about 70% moisture, so you're going to notice it's going to be quite sticky. So you can have a measuring cup or bowl of water that you can dip your hands into. So you want to measure out 22 grams of salt and about a quarter teaspoon of instant yeast. You say, wow, that's not much yeast. You're absolutely right. But because it's going to rise for 12 hours, that yeast is going to be active for a long time. So we don't need too much. So what you want to do is just take the yeast and salt and just sprinkle it evenly over the top. And then we are going to do a folding technique. And so the fold technique is actually pretty important. And so in a fold technique, so notice I'm just going to wet one of my hands here. And with the fold technique is you're basically just sort of picking up and bringing the four corners of the dough ball together. Okay? So we're just bringing the four corners of that dough ball together. And we'll get lots of shots of this so you can see it. So now I've brought the four corners together, and I'm going to use the pincer technique to mix it. And so I'm mixing the dough and basically just grasping it and squeezing. So just pincering like this. And we're going to do that so we can really just have a solid mix of the dough. So this does take a little bit of hand strength, and so I do the pincer technique, get through all the dough, rotate 90 degrees, and basically go across what I just cut. And every once in a while, I'm going to do another fold just to bring it back into a bit of a ball shape. So how much mixing should you do? Well, you want to do enough mixing, and you can wet your hand periodically if you feel the dough is getting sticky. enough mixing so it feels like it's one continuous material. So you're not feeling, separate flour, water, anything like that. Nothing that's sort of a hard lump inside. So your dough is already going to start to feel fairly elastic, because what dough really likes is time. So think about just how the dough and water sit together for a long time, and they really create that elastic sort of structure. So again, I'm just folding, so I kind of just put the dough underneath my hand and bring it back up. So I'm going to do one more set of the pincer. This dough is feeling pretty nice. The other thing about the dough is it likes to stay moist. Yeast likes to grow in warm, moist places. So we're going to let this bread rise at room temperature for 12 hours. Room temperature being 20, 21 degrees Celsius. If your house is 23, well, hey, nice for you, your heating bill's higher. But the long rise gives some complexity of flavor. So your dough can dry out, so make sure you're always covering it, because you can't add water later. So now this dough is good and mixed, and we're going to let it rest for about 5 minutes. Then we're going to come back and we're going to give it another fold. All right, so we're going to do our first fold. And so folding is literally, you've got the dough ball, you wet your hand, and you sort of just get under and you pick it up and fold it over. Rotate the bowl, pick it up, fold it over. And so the first fold we do is about 5 minutes after we have mixed it all together with the yeast. So we're being very gentle, okay? We don't want to break the strands of gluten that are forming, okay? I'm just using kind of the back side of my hand to get in, lift it up, stretch it, fold it over. So all in all, I'd probably go around the dough ball 2 complete revolutions, sometimes 3. And we want to do 3 folds in the first hour and a half. So I like to set my timer. So this was fold number 1. So we're just stretching up and laying it over. Stretch it up, lay it over. This helps to build the elasticity. So maybe I've gone around 3 times. Again, just grasping and folding over. As you can see here, my bowl is pretty clean. I don't like to leave a lot on the edge. You want to remember the size of your dough ball, because now we're after our 3rd fold, which I'm not going to show you all 3. It's going to go into its bulk fermentation. So it's going to grow over the next 12 to 13 hours, and you want it to triple in size. So 2.5 to 3 times the size. So next time we see this, it's going to be a big, gassy mess. And it's going to be great. Well, 13 hours later, open my bowl. What do I find? I've got a really nice, gassy, big, full, bulk fermented bread. So this rose about 13 hours. Depending on how warm your kitchen is in the summer, it's probably going to be 12 hours. In the winter, it could be 14 hours. But you want to have that nice, long fermentation. Now, the rest we have here is I'm going to make out of this batch. I made a 1.5 times batch. Your 1,000 gram flour batch is going to make either 2 artisan loaves of bread, or it could make instead of 2, you could have 2 pizzas and 1 artisan loaf of bread, or 4 pizzas. Yeah, you do the math there. So if you're going to make pizza, what you want to do is to take your dough and put it on. I like to put it on a couple of plates. Spray your plate with some sort of non-stick oil. I like to use Vegeline. It's completely non-GMO, all vegetable products, no ugly propellants, things like that. You could use your oil spritzer from Pampered Chef. Anything just makes the dough not stick to the plates. And you want to have some saran wrap because, of course, you have to cover everything, keep it moist. I'm going to do some proofing of my bread in wicker or rattan proofing baskets. Is available off Amazon. You can also proof in a kind of a medium-sized serving bowl. I've proofed in a colander lined with parchment paper. Okay, so whatever it proofs in, you kind of want it to be loafish shaped. You could proof in a loaf pan if you want more of a longer, style loaf. So really up to you. But next step is we want to flour our work surface, and it doesn't have to be a crazy amount, but you certainly do need flour on your counter. I've got a Pampered Chef dough divider, scraper thingy. This one comes from the Help With Breast Cancer. We've got a couple of those in our drawer. And so now inside the bowl, the dough is sort of stuck to the edges of the bowl. So I sprinkle a little bit of flour kind of around the edges of the bowl. Okay, just a little bit, not much. Because we want to ease out this nice big bowl of dough.
No.
Okay, good. All right, so we want to put some flour on our hands. Tip the bowl over and gently we're going to pull this dough ball out. So I'm just pulling the dough off from around the edges so that the dough ball just gently falls, it's eased onto the floured work surface. So again, I've put that little bit of flour around the edge of the bowl, which helps it to sort of release. And voila, there you've got 13 hours of fermentation. So now we want to divide the dough. I need to divide this into 3. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle a bit of flour along my dividing lines, how I'm going to divide it. Now, it's never going to be perfect, right? So here I am. I'm going to kind of divide that. And then I'm going to divide it here. Right. Now, again, one of our big goals here, I'm going to divide this again for my pizza. One of our big goals is to not manhandle the flour. Okay? So people may have made bread before and they let it rise till double and they punch it down. Not a lot of punching going on here. We're going to fold our dough. So what we want to do is pick up our dough, fold it over itself, fold it over itself, fold it over itself. So I tend to fold 3 or 4 times. So now we've got this dough ball here, and you want to have some flour on your hands, but not too much. So if you've ever made buns by rolling them on the countertop, you kind of know what I mean. We're just going to tuck the edges of our dough under, okay, till we've got a nice little ball. We don't have to have it as a tight soft ball. We're just going to have it as a little ball. Okay, that's going to start to proof there. So my other pizza. If you think you should weigh these, go ahead, but I would rather not have my sticky, some of the dough can get sticky, so I'm not going to try to weigh them. It is what it is. So some pizzas are bigger, some are smaller, same as some loaves of bread. So again, I'm just tucking it under the edge as I curl it. So using the sides of my hands, okay, just tucking under and curling. So again, not too much. And then I'll cover those with foil. Next, we're going to do the bread. Now, my lumps of dough are slightly uneven, so one's going to be larger than the other. But you can see as you are working with your own dough that there is going to be nice big gas bubbles. So we're going to, again, fold it over, and we're putting the seam side down. Okay, and we are just ever so gently forming it into a loaf. If you want loaves that look more like soft balls, like big round loaves, then you do want to spend more time shaping them like this. But the more time you spend shaping and tightening the dough ball, you are compressing more of the gas, and you risk bursting gas bubbles on your surface, which means that you don't have as much of that nice kind of airy loaf. I can feel that I've popped a few there. So I'm putting it in my proofing baskets. My proofing baskets are lined with a bit of rice flour. I just got these for Christmas, so I was making artisan bread with using salad bowls and a colander as my proofing vessels, so you can do it. You don't always need the very best equipment. All right. So again, just turning. I've had to pop a couple gas bubbles that are really on the surface here. You hear them pop. So what happens in the proofing stage is that there is still, the bread is still going to rise a little bit, and it's going to, the gluten fiber is going to continue to relax, but all those little air bubbles are going to be trapped inside. And then when you put them in the super hot oven, then they are going to rise quickly. So the next stage here is just a little bit of timing. So you want to proof your bread about an hour, hour and a quarter. When we come back on video, we'll do the finger dent test so you can tell if they're done proofing. But when you're done proofing, they need to go into a hot oven. So when I'm cooking and talking about timing, I always work backwards. So if I want to put these in the oven in approximately an hour, I want to have that oven good and preheated. So the oven needs to preheat to 475 for about 45 minutes. Okay, so in 15 minutes, I'm going to put my oven on. I also want to preheat my cookware. So I want to put in my enamel cast oven. Dutch oven. I found it's probably helpful to put this in about 20 minutes before it's needed, and that gets it nice and warm. And I tend to put it on the middle rack in my oven. If it's right on the bottom, I find it's too hot on the bottom, and I'm going to scorch the bottom of the bread, so kind of in the middle. Now, the fun thing with the pizza dough is that this pizza dough is going to go in the fridge. And it can go in the fridge for, 4 hours. It can go in the fridge for 48 hours. Just cover it and, put some oil or cooking spray on the bottom of your tin or on the bottom of your saran wrap so it doesn't stick to the dough ball. Put it in the fridge. That longer extended proofing time in the fridge, again, helps to create a very elasticy, very flexible dough. And so pizza dough, always recommended to do some proofing in the fridge for the very best dough. Now, weeknight, you don't have time, hey, you're just not going to do it. But that's what we're going to do with our pizza. Pull it. No. All right, so our dough has been proofing under some oiled saran wrap, and it's been in the baskets. And so we want to see that it's optimally proofed. Now, I don't think I'm an expert in this area, but from an hour to an hour and a quarter is probably what you're looking for. If you let it proof too long, this is where your loaves will fall in the oven. And I've had that experience a lot with making bread in traditional pans. And so the finger dent test is the easiest way to sort of tell. So I'm going to do this multiple times for you. So put some water on your finger, press it into the loaf, and if it bounces back partially, that's where you want to be. If the dent stays, you're overproofed. If it bounces back completely right away, you are underproofed. You see that? Mm-hmm. So finger dent test, press in. It should come back some, but not all the way. So now we know our loaves are proofed. We want to put them in the oven. And so in the oven, I have been pre-warming my Dutch oven. Okay. And so I'm going to get it out of the oven. warming at 475. I don't need to tell you, that's hot. So I'm gonna put a bit of flour on the counter. Never put my flour away. And I'm gonna tip my loaf out from my proofing basket. A little flour in my hands. I'm just gonna go and lift from the edge, set it in. Again, that is hot. Don't touch. I'm gonna put the lid on, and that's gonna grow quite nicely. Key is that it's a nice hot oven, and it's gonna get that initial spring. And we're gonna bake it now for 30 minutes at 475. Then we're gonna take the lid off and let it finish baking for about another 15 minutes or so into a really nice crusty loaf. So off camera, Amy and I had a discussion. Do you like your bread with a really thick, crusty crust? Or do you want it to be not quite as crusty? So originally I said put it in for a total of 45 minutes, 30 minutes with the lid on and another 15 minutes with the lid off. But Amy said last week, secretly she baked them for only 10 minutes with the lid off. So anyways, I'm gonna pull out the enamel cast iron from the oven, and here's what it looks like inside. There's what it looks like upside down. So it got a little bit of char on the bottom, that's okay. Nice, solid, darkly browned loaf. And so you can see how that grew very nicely from the very size it was when we tipped it out of the proofing basket. So it had a nice initial spring. And later on, after we cut into it, we'll show what the structure of the crust is. All right, so we're ready to cut into our loaf. And get your bread knife. And of course, you're gonna have a little bit of a crust, you're gonna have some crumbs, but that's really what makes it. So, just cut into that loaf. So what you have is just some really nice crumb texture. So you want to have some air bubbles. You don't necessarily want to have like huge air bubbles, but at the same time you want a crumb that's not crummy, right? So sometimes, like, if you want to compare this to store-bought bread, it's going to be totally different. So if I get for you some regular old sort of Dempster's brown bread, when you're looking at the crumb structure, right, this has, you know, bread is kind of dense, kind of crumb structure, but this will have very moist, very tight structure. So when you get your old world breads, like a ciabatta or a really good loaf of French bread, you can just tell the difference that way. So that's what you're making here. And then when we make this into pizza crust, you're going to see how that crumb structure just really expands to make a really nice crust. So hope you try it out and enjoy.